Mario Kart 64. It's a great game with some great tracks. But which track is the best? Well, today we are going to be ranking all those tracks to find out which is the best track in Mario Kart 64. These tracks will be ranked from worst to best. The tracks will be ranked based on how fun they are to play, and the rankings will reflect my own opinions. So prepare for a couple of hot takes. I won't compare these tracks to remade versions of them in later games such as Mario Kart Wii or Mario Kart 8. Each track will also be given a score between 1 to 5 stars. So we can do some maths to determine which cup has the best tracks at the end of the rankings. Now with all that out the way, let's begin. Banshee Broadwalk. I'm not sure if this is a hot take or not, but I don't find this track enjoyable at all. The track isn't very interesting, and it's a track that ends up being much more frustrating than fun. It's one of the more challenging tracks in the game as the track is quite narrow and it's pretty easy to fall off. And if you do fall off, you are basically f***ed as it takes a very long time to respawn after falling off in Mario Kart 64. There also aren't that many opportunities for overtaking opponents on this track, which doesn't help make this course feel any more exciting or fun. The whole course feels bland and dull to me, and the music for this track isn't that great either. I can see why others would enjoy this track, but this track just isn't for me. Frappe Snowland. One of the two snow tracks in Mario Kart 64. Sadly, Frappe Snowland is another frustrating track within Mario Kart 64. The track is pretty slippy because of the snow and ice, and there are a lot of tight turns that aren't fun to take due to the slippiness. There are also snowmen scattered around the course that are just more of a nuisance than a fun obstacle to avoid. One aspect of the track that really annoys me though is that if you try use mushrooms to take a shortcut over the snowy hills, Lakitu will just come and stop you from doing that. This really annoyed me as I was banned from performing any pro gamer shortcuts on this track. Overall, it's a pretty plain bare bones looking snow track that is just frustrating to play on. Sherbet Land. Onto the 2-star rated tracks and the second snow track in Mario Kart 64. Yeah, I don't really like the snow tracks in this game. As this is a snow track, you will find this track to be very slippery again, and this time instead of avoiding snowmen, you are avoiding penguins. There is one kind of cool bit in Sherbet Land where you get to go in this cave, but apart from that, the rest of the track is quite bland. The penguins are very cute though, so this snow track deserves to be ranked higher than Frappe's Snowland. Choco Mountain. This is another pretty bland and boring track. Everything here is just a shade of brown, making this track feel very dull to race on. There are loads of bumps on the track as well that you have to go over, which I'm not a fan of, especially the 3 bumps at the end of the track. There is one section where there are some falling boulders coming towards you, which I guess tries to make this track feel a bit more exciting, but these boulders are really easy to avoid. I wouldn't say this is a frustrating track to race on, it's just kind of meh. Luigi Raceway. 3-star tracks. Luigi Raceway is the first track in this game, so you would expect it to be a pretty basic track. Even though it's quite a simple track, it's still pretty fun to race on, and I like it. Also, quick side note, but does anyone else find it funny that in a game called Mario Kart, the first track in the game is based off of Luigi? I'm not complaining, I just find it really funny. That's a win for the Luigi stands. Moo Moo Farm. A simple track that is essentially just a big circle. Scattered along the course are some Monty Moles for you to avoid, and 2 bridges you need to be careful not to crash into. Oh, and you get to look at cows while you race, which is pretty cool. It's another simple but fun track. Yoshi Valley. This is an interesting track. There are loads of different pathways you can take, which sounds like a good thing at first, as it makes the track more interesting because of all the different routes you can take. The downside to these multiple pathways though, is that once you know the fastest route, you are only going to use that route, so the rest of the paths feel pointless. This can also disadvantage new players racing against experienced players, since experienced players would already know the quickest route while the new player would not. This would put the experienced player at a bigger advantage, which feels a bit unfair. This is still a pretty good track though, which I enjoy playing on. Koopa Troopa Beach. The only beach track within Mario Kart 64, and it's pretty good. You'll race along on the beach where you'll come across some palm trees and crabs. It's a simple track, but it has my favourite shortcut in this game. If you have a mushroom, you can jump off this ramp into the cave, which skips a huge portion of the track, and it's a really satisfying shortcut to take if you can pull it off. Great shortcut and a great track. Mario Raceway. Another track which I quite like. There are lots of turns here, leading to a lot of opportunities for drifting, and there are loads of places on the course where you can use mushrooms to overtake your opponents. The theming of the track is quite simple, but the track's layout is interesting, and there is a cool big pipe you get to race through. Solid track. Royal Raceway. Royal Raceway has a pretty good track layout featuring that massive jump in the middle of the track. You can overtake opponents on this track quite easily as well if you have mushrooms or a star, which feels really satisfying to pull off. But the most satisfying thing to do on the track is to throw a red shell at your opponent just as they jump off off the massive ramp. This will make them fall slowly to the ground and is bound to push them back into last place. Fun track, Calamari Desert. This is a pretty flat course with there being loads of opportunities for overtaking opponents again. There is also a train that you have to avoid while racing. I do like the train, but there are times where it can get a little frustrating. The train's path intersects with the racetrack, so sometimes you will have to stop to wait for the train to pass. This can cause a cluster of carts to pile up while waiting for the train to pass, which can lead to absolute chaos once everyone can race again, but most of the time it just kills the flow of racing. Besides this complaint, I still really enjoy playing on this track. Toad's Turnpike, our 4-star tracks. This is a very unique track as it is the first track to include moving vehicles that you have to avoid. These vehicles include cars, trucks, buses and more. The vehicles are a great addition to this track and they help make this a fun, challenging course. I do, however, have some minor complaints about this track that stop it from being ranked higher up in the list. One of these complaints is that the second half of the lap feels very narrow, as two vehicles can, at times, block the road completely, making it very difficult to overtake these vehicles. Another issue I have is that sometimes when you get hit by one vehicle, you can immediately get hit by another one due to the lack of invincibility frames after being hit, which seems incredibly unfair. The track layout is also quite simple, but overall, it's still a unique track I enjoy racing on. Wario Stadium. This is a dirt bike course with Wario's face plastered around the whole of the stadium. This track has one of the more interesting layouts within Mario Kart 64, and there are lots of tight turns to take and jumps to perform. Wario Stadium is one of the longer tracks in the game, but it's a really fun track. Rainbow Road. I bet a lot of you thought this would be my number 1 on the list. Well, while I do really like this track, and it was so close to being given a 5-star rating, I do have some problems with it. To start with, this track is way too easy as there are no places where you can fall off on this course, as there are handrails across the whole course. You would think for the last track in Mario Kart 64 that it would be one of the more challenging courses in the game. You will come across some chain chomps across the track, which does at least make the course a little bit more of a challenge, but these chain chomps are just annoying as sometimes they feel like they just pop in from out of nowhere, and the obvious complaint about this track is that it's way too damn long. I mean, 5 minutes for a Mario Kart track. By the time you get to the third lap, I'm bored and want this track to be over. This track was so close to being given a 5-star rating, but I can't overlook the problems I have with this track. Besides me being quite harsh on this track, it's still Rainbow Road. I love the track's theming, music, and this is one of my favourite tracks within Mario Kart 64, with it being ranked at the number 3 spot on my list. DK's Jungle Parkway, the runner up on the list and one of the 2 5-star rated tracks. This track is fantastic. The jungle theming for this track is great, and visually it's one of the best tracks to look at in this game. There are so many cool elements in this track, like the big jump over the river, the narrow bridge, which is a great area for using your banana or shell power-ups, and the cave you drive through, which you can also take a massive shortcut in if you have mushrooms. This track also features lots of tight turns, and there are plenty of opportunities here for you to overtake your opponents in style. All these elements make this a brilliant fun track to play on, and it's easily a 5-star rated track. In fact, this track was so close to being ranked number 1 on my list, but instead, the track I have chosen to be crowned as the number 1 track in Mario Kart 64 is Bowser's Castle. Honestly, I kept going back and forth on whether this or DK's Jungle Parkway was my favourite track in the game, but after a lot of thinking and debating, I've settled on Bowser's Castle being my favourite track. Bowser's Castle is easily the most challenging course in the game, but also a really fun one. There are loads of thwomps, fire-breathing statues, narrow bridges, and there are loads of areas where you can fall off into fire pits. I mean, to give you an idea on how challenging this track is, within seconds of starting the course, you are greeted with a massive Bowser statue breathing fire at you trying to murder you. If that doesn't scream the message that this is a difficult course to you, then I don't know what will. The track's theme is also great, and you can totally imagine Bowser living in a castle like this. This is an elite Mario Kart track, and it's my favourite track in Mario Kart 64. That's my list of rankings, so now it's time to use the star rating system to calculate an average score for each cup. From my ratings, Star Cup was my favourite, with it receiving a score of 3.5 out of 5, followed by Special Cup in second place sitting at a score of 3.25, Mushroom Cup in third place with a score of 3, and Flower Cup in last place with a score of 2.5. This checks out as Star Cup features my favourite track Bowser's Castle and other great tracks like Wario's Stadium. I can see why Flower Cup ended up being ranked in last place. While it does have tracks like Toad's Turnpike, it also has Frappe Snowland and Choco Mountain, which aren't that fun to race on at all. Finally, I took all the star ratings from each track and did some maths to work out a score for the quality of tracks overall within Mario Kart 64, and that score ended up being 3.06, which I have rounded up to 3.1. This is a much higher score than what I gave to Super Mario Kart on the SNES, so even though Mario Kart 64 has fewer courses, the quality of the tracks in Mario Kart 64 are much better. Now, if you want to find out how I ranked every track in Super Mario Kart on the SNES, then click on this video to find out. But the most satisfying thing to do on this track is to throw a red shell at your opponent just as they jump off. Did you hear my voice crack? That was bad, you know. That was bad. No, I'm 20 and I'm having voice cracks. I want to die.